Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about scripting in Arcanum. Now I was going to compare and contrast it with Fallout scripting, but Fallout script came directly from Starfleet Academy. I never used it. I wasn't the one who integrated it in. So while I know what it was like, I don't really have any use in it. And so I'm going to defer that for now. But let me talk about Arcanum's scripting. One of the issues when we started Arcanum was we didn't have the budget to hire any scripters, and the programmers already had so much on their plate that there was really no way that they were going to do all the scripting as well as all the coding. So I set out to make a script editor for a script language that anybody could use, not just coders. I wanted to make it simple. I wanted to make it intuitive. I wanted to make it something that would help prevent a lot of the common errors I saw in Fallout, which were things like just scripts with syntax errors in them or loops, infinite loops. So I tried to do that. I wrote an editor called SockMonkey. I tried to take a video, a Windows video of it, but none of the pop-ups that happen within SockMonkey will record. So I'm just going to talk about it. So every script in Arcanum had its own flags, and these are things that we wanted to be able to test without actually looking into the script. There were things like, this is a trap script, so that way if any object in the scene had a trap script on it, that's what detect traps would highlight. And it also meant that, using that script, using that object in any way is what triggered the trap. The script could also have flags like, you only run me once and then you delete me. It could also have something called a teleport trigger, and what that was used for is normally you could only put scripts on a tile so when it got entered, but if you teleported across an area, it would not trigger. The teleport trigger said if someone teleports from one area to another in a direct line, then if any of the scripts on that direct line have teleport trigger on it, run them anyway. So every script had its own local counters and flags, so that were preserved between script execution. It could access global arrays of variables and flags, and also it could look at any data that was kept on the player. So every line in SockMonkey was either a conditional or an action. So it was either an if-then or an action. But secretly, they were all if-thens. If you told it you wanted an action, it just internally wrote, if true, then do this, else do nothing, because it would just always run the then, and it would display it as an action. You thought it was an action, but internally everything was just a conditional. So the way these things worked is when you selected whether it was an action or condition. Let's say you did a condition. You could then select conditions from a drop-down menu. These would be things like obj has item, or obj is within n tiles of obj. And I'll explain the parameters in a second. Actions would be, again, selected from a drop-down. Those would be things like set global n, or print message n, or have obj cast spell on obj. Now those parameters I've been mentioning, those were also selected with a drop-down. If you had a number, it would just have you type in a number, or you could say, get the number from this local or global variable. Then it would look it up on the appropriate list. So there was a message list, so if you said print message n, it would look it up on the message list. If you said they have item n, it would look up, there could be a list of items you could make, and it would look up the nth one. For spells, there was a spell list. There were lots of lists that were already available in the game. And those were there for a lot of reasons. But the script system could use them as well. What was cool about obj, though, was we had a lot of predefined objects, like player was an obj. So you could select player for the obj. You could select triggerer, which was who activated this script. So if you opened a door, you were the triggerer. You could also say attachee. So if you open the door, the attachee's the door, because it's the one that has a script on it. I also had a concept of every and any. So you could say like every follower, any follower, everyone on team, which would include the player and all the followers, or anyone in party, which in multiplayer would be all the players. What was cool about that was every and any were great for conditionals. You could say, let's say there's a door and you can open it, it's locked, but if anybody has the key, it can open. You could put on the door's open attachment, I'll talk about attachments in a second, you could say, if anyone in the party has key 5, then return to default, which is the door can be open. Otherwise return, and it would skip it. And I'll talk about that in a second too. What was cool about every and any was not only is it great for conditionals, you could say if you could also make a door that required everyone to have like a hat on or the door wouldn't open. You could say if everyone in the party had item and it's the hat. But you could also use every in the loops. You could say for everyone in party. And then you could, inside that loop, there's a special object called loop object. So it would loop through everyone and you could run some actions that would happen on everyone in the party. Or if you wanted to test something on everyone in the party, you could say for everyone in the party and then check for things on them. Originally, we didn't have a go-to. However, scripts had to be able to call other scripts. And I soon discovered that, because I was called on to debug it, that people would have script A call script B and then call script A, and a loop would happen that way. So I put in go-tos to let you jump around inside one script, but I had to put on fail-safes in the script system. So if it ever tried to run, I think it was more than 1,000 lines, it would just tap out and go, I've executed 1,000 lines of scripts, I don't think this thing is ending. And I never thought those would trigger. They triggered. I mentioned 2 return values. This was important because there were lots of different ways to attach a script, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if a script just said return, that meant it would return and run whatever the default was supposed to happen for that attachment point. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. If it said return to default, it would run and do the default stuff. If it said return, then that means go back to whatever called me and don't do the default action. That's the script's way of saying I handled it. So if you had a door and on its open attachment point you put return, well, the default is that you can open the door. So if you pass back return, the door would not be opened and it would just print a message saying you can't open the door. The return to default would allow you to open the door. Same thing on a container. Same thing on, you could put it on anything. You could put it on anyone's use. So let's talk about attachment points. There was a big list of places you could attach scripts. You could attach it on the use of it. You could attach it on an item being picked up. You could attach it on an item being wielded. So like you pick up a sword, it goes in your inventory, you wield it, now you're holding it in your hand, on selling it to someone. So I'll give you an example of how that would work. Let's say you had an attachment point on a merchant for buy object. And let's say what that actually says is it defaults to the NPC, who's the attachee, buying an item, which is the triggerer. If it says return, he won't buy it. His default is to buy it. So let's say you wanted to make a special object that no merchant would buy, because for your quest, you wanted to make it so that it couldn't be sold to a merchant, or only one merchant would ever be interested in buying it. You could put scripts on your merchants saying if you try to, if on their attempt to buy this object, it would just return, so they wouldn't buy it. Similarly, you could have, there's a wheeled on script attachment point. So every time somebody tries to wield it, that script gets called. You could say if the creature who's trying to wield it, if you do return, that means he can't wield it, so it won't go on. You could maybe make a sword that you can only wield if your magic score is above 90, let's say. So it's a sword that can only be wielded by super magical people in Arcanum. You could check to see if the person trying to wield it had a magic skill of 90, and if they didn't, you return. If they did, you return to default, because the default of wield is put it on you, is let you wield it. Similarly, for wield off, you could test things like, you could make a cursed item and say this item cannot be removed. So a cursed item would just get a script saying return, because return to default would let you remove it, so return would not let you remove it. Then, if the only way to take it off was to finish quest, the quest would take the quest script would take it off. If there was a spell that could do it, you could put a script saying when that spell was cast on it, you can remove the object can be removed. So this is how we did a ton of things in Arcanum, because we would agree what the default would be in the code, and I would code it that way, and then in the few places that a person making a quest or an item would want it to behave differently, he put attachments on. So that was really cool, because it let us have a lot of power, it let non-scripters make a lot of scripts, and it let us do a lot, remember, with only 14 people. So I'm pretty sure Sock Monkey went out, because it was part of like World Editor and other things that we shipped to try to make the game moddable. I think it was a success, because we had a lot of people on the team make scripts, including artists and some QA folks who had no previous experience doing code. So I think it was pretty successful. It also, because of the nature of how it wrote out the data, it was executable really fast. So scripts were not a huge drain. And Arcanum, of course, was using every last CPU cycle it could get. So I'd say Sock Monkey was a pretty good success for us in Arcanum. I wish I could show a video of it doing anything but sitting there, because all the pop-ups refuse to show. But I'll figure it out. Anyway, I hope this answers some questions and gives you some insight in how we did scripting in Arcanum.